back to Court TV Live. We are turning our attention now to New Jersey, where we are following our next live trial here on Court TV, the Treadmill abuse murder trial, where the defendant is Christopher Gregor. He's charged with murder and endangering the welfare of a child. This in connection to the death of his 6-year-old son back in April of 2021. Gregor told investigators that he took his son, Corey Michelot, to the hospital after he started experiencing symptoms of nausea and shortness of breath. And while he had his son at the hospital, his son began having seizures, and just about an hour later, he was pronounced dead. Now, before we get you into the courtroom to hear those opening statements, here's some background on the case. Court TV anchor Julie Grant has more on the case against Christopher Gregor.
So, guys, this is my mommy.
Police say 6-year-old Corey Michelot died at the hands of his own father. Christopher Gregor is charged with first-degree murder. Gregor is accused of forcing Corey to run on a treadmill, calling him too fat as he increased the speed, causing Corey to fall repeatedly. Investigators say video from Gregor's apartment gym shows the incident. Later, he brought Corey to the hospital, where he died from blunt impact injuries.
We all know what happened. If it was an accident, everything would be different.
Court documents say Gregor later Googled, "Can your phone be tracked in airplane mode?" He also searched how long after an autopsy to file charges.
We don't have the full context of what was being searched, why it was being searched. It could be completely innocent.
Gregor's defense attorney released a statement to Court TV discrediting the state's case, saying in part, quote, "The death of Corey Michelot is tragic, but not murder. Unfortunately, Corey died from natural causes." He added, Dr. Michael Baden, one of the nation's most esteemed forensic pathologists, will testify for the defense. Dr. Baden has played a key role in high-profile investigations, including the O.J. Simpson and George Floyd cases. Investigators say Gregor fled the state after Corey's death. Months later, he was charged with endangering the welfare of a child. On March 9th, 2022, he was arrested for murder and pleaded not guilty. Corey's mom, Bree Michelot, says she made many reports of physical abuse to New Jersey Child Protective Services after Gregor came into Corey's life in 2019.
DCP&P should have done their jobs, and we wouldn't be here right now.
She says she has faith in the prosecutors to bring justice for her son.
It's just so hard knowing what we know. I can basically use my mind, and I can picture, it's horrible, but I just, from the autopsy report and knowing how Chris is, and just, I can tell what happened that day. It's their jobs to prove it, and hopefully they can.
So when court started this morning, before those opening statements kicked off, Corey's mom, Brianna Michelot, who you heard right there, she testified outside of the presence of the jury as part of an admissibility hearing regarding communications that she had with the defendant, Christopher Gregor. Now, Michelot told the court that she had several conversations with him in the days leading up to her son's death, including one just hours before. Take a listen.
Calling your attention to April 2nd of 2021 at approximately 3:30 p.m., did you have a phone conversation with the defendant in regard to your son, Corey?
Yes.
And can you tell the court what the defendant said in that phone conversation?
He told me Corey wasn't feeling good, that he was lethargic, and he was throwing up and his legs hurt. He was just sick, and he asked me for Corey's insurance card and decided to.
And did the defendant tell you where he was taking Corey?
He said he was going to the hospital. He was taking Corey to the hospital.
And did he tell you which hospital he was going to take Corey to?
No.
Now, the judge, after hearing that testimony being proffered, ruled that all of Michelo's conversations with the defendant are going to be admissible. So we will hear from not only her, but some of those recordings during her testimony. That happened after these opening statements. Let's get you to that now. Prosecutor Jamie Schron delivered her opening statement to the jury first.
Ms. Schron.
Thank you. Corey Travis Michelo. He liked the solar system. He liked to play outside. His mom describes him as silly and happy. Corey was 6 on April 2nd, 2021, when his father murdered him. His father is this defendant, Christopher Gregor. This case is about Corey and how Corey became the ultimate victim of this defendant's punishment and abuse. During the course of the trial, you're going to hear from a number of witnesses and see a lot of evidence. You'll learn that on May 1st of 2014, Corey was born to Brianna Michelo when she was just 17 years old. This defendant didn't come into Corey's life, and neither did the Gregors, until Corey was 4 or 5. Back in March of 2021, Corey's parents hadn't been together, but they shared custody. Corey lived with the defendant, and his mom had visitation. On March 20th of 2021, Corey's mom picked him up for a visit. They went to Pennsylvania, and they saw their family. They were supposed to be back at about 3 or 4 o'clock. They were in Pennsylvania, there was traffic, and they were running late. Corey's mom told the defendant that. But Brianna's lateness, you'll hear, was pissing him off. He told Brianna to drop Corey off at the apartment complex's gym and meet him there. So she did. Corey and the defendant went into the gym, and you'll see what happened next. Because that gym had a surveillance system, and you will see what this defendant did to his son inside that gym. After that day, when Corey went back to school during the week, his teacher, his first grade teacher, started to notice some bruises on Corey. She was concerned. She's going to tell you that after March 25th of 2021, Corey was never physically back in person in school ever again. During this time, Corey's mom was also concerned. She had seen bruises as well. She was so concerned that she filed an emergent application with the court to get custody. On April 1st of 2021, Corey's mom picked him up for her only visitation she had had that week, or during the week, which was 3 hours, and she brought him to a pediatrician. Corey spoke to the pediatrician. The pediatrician saw Corey's bruises. She too was concerned. So she sent Corey and his mom to a local hospital nearby. Ultimately, Corey was seen at Jersey Shore University Medical Center. And while at Jersey Shore, doctors looked at Corey's body. They checked his lungs, they checked his bones, they checked his labs, and shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning or around there, Corey was discharged. He was medically cleared for release because there was nothing wrong with Corey's lungs. There was nothing wrong with Corey's bones, and his labs were normal. Corey was fine except for his bruises. Now, Corey's mom tried to bring Corey back to the defendant. Her visitation was over, and while they were at the doctor earlier, she learned that her application for custody had been denied in that regard, but that a child abuse examination had been ordered within 7 days by a specialist. And so, in trying to keep with the visitation schedule, she contacted the defendant and tried to bring Corey back, but he didn't answer. And so, since it's after 1 o'clock in the morning, Corey's mom and Corey go back to her house in Englishtown. And the two of them get home, everyone's asleep, they go in the basement, and they go to bed. That's where her room is. Corey wakes up in the morning, he has his breakfast, his mom dresses him in clean clothes, and he's with his mom the whole time. And she drives him back to the defendant's apartment in Barnegat. Corey and his mom sat in the car in the parking lot, and they said goodbye for what would be the very last time. Corey was walking. Corey was talking. Corey was fine, except for his bruises. By 9:03 a.m., Corey was back inside the defendant's apartment. And you'll hear that the defendant wasn't happy. But he told people, Corey's okay, Corey's all right. Except by 3:48 p.m., this defendant carried Corey's nearly limp body into Southern Ocean Medical Center. He reported that Corey was sleepy and had thrown up. Corey was admitted quickly. He was brought to room 6 in the emergency department. Corey coded. He was intubated. He coded again. He lost his pulse. And by 5:03 p.m., Corey was pronounced dead. This defendant, shortly after, walked out of the hospital, got into his car, and he left. Left the hospital, and he left Corey. You're going to hear from witnesses in this case that will tell you that defendant was found in Tennessee on April 4th. Now, a forensic pathologist that reviewed Corey's autopsy and his medical records is going to testify. He's a doctor. And he will tell you that Corey was a once healthy 6-year-old boy that died from blunt force trauma. He will describe for you the contusions on Corey's body all over in different stages of healing. He will tell you that the inflammatory response throughout Corey's body was acute. He's going to describe that Corey's heart and liver were both lacerated. Now, what you won't hear is that Corey was struck with a bat, stomped on by the defendant. You're not going to hear that. Because the only people there in that apartment were the defendant and Corey. But what you will hear is that the only people that were in that apartment were the defendant and Corey. And that the serious bodily injury that Corey sustained while with the defendant, and only the defendant, were so catastrophic that they ended his life. Now, there are 2 charges in this case. The first, endangering the welfare of a child, and the second, murder. The state must prove both beyond a reasonable doubt. That means you're firmly convinced, and that's a burden the state embraces. That first count, endangering the welfare of a child, is for what this defendant did to Corey in the gym on May 20th, 2021. And that second count is for what this defendant did to Corey on April 2nd, 2021. That's the murder. In order to prove a murder, the state has to demonstrate that a defendant acted purposely or knowingly. But rarely is there a person that can come into court and tell you what someone was thinking when they engaged in a particular act. So how do we prove that to you? We have to look at all the things the defendant was doing before, during, and after those crimes. Now, an expert in digital forensics will testify, and he'll tell you that he examined the defendant's cell phone. And from the defendant's cell phone, he was able to learn that throughout the day on April 2nd, 2021, the defendant was texting with a female associate, making plans for that night. On that same date, 3 hours before Corey died, he took a selfie with Corey on the couch. He also ordered McDonald's during that afternoon, and he did a search on his phone for loss of consciousness, sleepy, and nauseous. You're going to have information before you, and I'd ask you to consider it, about what this defendant was doing all day, at home, at the hospital, after he left. What he was saying to the people at the hospital, to Corey's mom, and everyone else. His texts, his phone calls, his web searches, his selfie, even his garbage. I'm going to ask that you pay attention to all of that. And when you do that, please pay attention to what's happening to Corey that day, that afternoon. On April 2nd, 2021, when Corey was brought back to his father, he vomited. He defecated in his pants, and his body was slowly shutting down. Consider what the defendant's doing while you consider what's happening to Corey. There were a lot of people in Corey's life, and you'll hear about some of them. Some might be positive, and some might not. But don't let that derail you. You all came here to serve as jurors in this case with everything that you need. And those are your life experiences and your common sense. Use it. Corey was alive and well at 9 a.m. when he was with his mom, and he was gone by 5:03 p.m. after only being with his father, this defendant. The state submits that after you've heard and seen all of the evidence in this case, you will be firmly convinced that this defendant is guilty of abuse and murder. Because healthy 6-year-olds don't just die during the course of a business day, and neither did Corey Michelot.
Thank you. Mr. Galucci.
What a heartbreaking end of life for little Corey Michelot. The defense, how will they respond to what the prosecution's allegations are after this? Back to Court TV Live, I'm Julia Janae. We're turning our attention now back to New Jersey, where we are watching the opening statements in the case against defendant Christopher Gregor. He is standing trial, charged with endangering the welfare of a child. It's a first-degree murder case, and the victim is his son, Corey Michelot, who's only 6 years old. He was bouncing back and forth between his mother's home and his father's home. The state says his father, Gregor, forced the child to run on a treadmill, repeatedly adjusting the speed, causing him to fall, repeatedly hitting his face and head. He died just weeks after that incident. If Gregor is convicted, he faces up to life in prison. Let's go back into the courtroom now. We are listening to the opening statement. It's the defense's turn now to address the jury.
In August of 2017, Christopher Gregor was studying for his master's degree at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. And he was also employed by Urban Teachers, which was a company that employed people to teach in urban areas. When he found out he was being sued for child support for a child he had never met, nor did he know he fathered. And that's where our story begins. Once again, I'm Mario Galucci, along with Andrea, and we represent Christopher. And although Ms. Schron just gave you a tidy little box with a little bow around it, that is far from what we believe the evidence is going to show you. As a matter of fact, the judge just told you that nothing Ms. Schwan said is evidence. As a matter of fact, nothing I'm telling you right now is evidence. The only evidence you're going to hear is going to come right from that chair. And I'm going to tell you right now that our version of this evidence looks nothing like Ms. Schwan's evidence. The evidence is going to show that Christopher was notified by a court document that he had to take a paternity test, and that was in 2017. You will hear that by court and whatever, by 2018, 2019, he learned that he was the father of Corey in order to pay child support. But he decided he wasn't going to just do that. He wasn't going to just pay child support. He was going to be a father. And he, along with his family, decided that they were going to embrace Corey and bring them into his life. At the time that Christopher learned he was Corey's father, the mother, Brianna, was living with her mother and another individual. And you will learn that that individual and Brianna split up. And it was right after that split up that they notified Christopher that he owed them child support. You will hear that Christopher decided to move in with his family in Monroe, New Jersey, right here. His father David, his mother Carolyn, and they took care of this young boy. They bought him a bicycle. They taught him how to ride, taught him how to play soccer, taught him how to play baseball, taught him how to play football. And at that time, they shared custody with the Mitchells. Then, somewhere around March of 2020, because of some challenges that Brianna Mitchello had, she no longer had custody of Corey, and custody went to Mr. Gregor. He was given full parental custody, and Ms. Mitchello was not to have any visitation with Corey. And as those challenges continued, your evidence will show that Rebecca Mitchello, Brianna's mother, asked to have visitation, which was granted. And at that time, Brianna was still not able to interact in Corey's life. You will see that through time, Brianna came back into Corey's life, thanks in part to the Gregor family, who assisted her somewhat to get through her challenges, and then agreed slowly to give her visitation of Corey, and they did.
We're hitting the pause button. We'll get right back in for more of that defense argument or opening statement in front of this jury saying that Chris is not the villain here. Don't go anywhere.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a closer look at the crime scene in the trial of Karen Reed, the Massachusetts woman who claims that she's being framed for the murder of her police officer boyfriend. Plus, a deep dive into new revelations from today's gripping testimony.
What was the question that she asked? Is he dead?
We're live from Massachusetts with the latest in the killer or cover-up murder trial.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. We are following the case of New Jersey versus Christopher Gregor, who's accused of not only murder, but also endangering a child in the death of his son, Corey, who passed away at a hospital. We're listening to the defense give their opening statement to the jury. This is after the prosecution has said that Corey was killed by the defendant after chronic abuse in his care. The mother of Corey is someone who was not with the defendant at the time. They lived in separate homes, and this child was going from house to house. Let's go in and listen to how the defense continues to say that this was not Christopher Gregor's fault.
You will see that the Mitchellos and the Gregors became like the Hatfields and the McCoys. It's unbelievable what you're going to hear in this case is evidence between the two families going back and forth over this poor child. But you will see, and what I will agree with, is what Ms. Schron just told you about a treadmill video. You're going to see that on March 20th, Christopher takes that young boy into a gym that's part of his residential complex. And in that gym, you see him put Corey on the treadmill, and he begins to work out while he's watching him from across the room. At some point, you're going to see Christopher go over to that treadmill and speed it up. And you're going to see Corey fall. And you're going to see him pick that boy up 6 times. And 6 times put him back on the treadmill. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to like him. And I don't care if you like him. When you see that video, you're going to be horrified. You're going to be mortified. But I'm telling you right now that the evidence you're going to see of Corey's death had absolutely nothing to do with that treadmill. As a matter of fact, the treadmill incident was on March 20th. And between March 20th and April 2nd, Corey spent a significant amount of time with Brianna, spent a significant amount of time with Christopher, and actually tried out for a flag football team here in Ocean County, and did so well in the tryout that the coach actually had discussions with Christopher to raise him up a level. You will hear that Brianna became suspicious of some bruises. Bruises to his chest, bruises to his arms. And I submit to you, those bruises did occur from a treadmill. They occurred from football. They occurred from boys being boys. You'll hear testimony that on a regular basis, Christopher would take him to a field across the street and play football with him like any other dad, that he practiced with him for this tryout. You hear testimony that Christopher himself was actually an athlete who competed in football. You will hear that when she sees the bruises, Ms. Micholo, that she makes an emergency application to the court to regain the full custody, by the way, which she never, ever had gotten back from March of 2020. And that application was denied. DCP&P, they start investigation. They tell her, take it to the pediatrician, and she chooses Ivy Pediatrics. She goes to Ivy Pediatrics, and they do an exam. They don't really find too much wrong with him, except he has bruises. They do blood work. They do tests. Healthy. Just like Michonne told you. Healthy. But they recommended to her that she follow up and that they would want to take her to Jersey Shore Medical Center to follow up on a child abuse allegation from the treadmill. You will see that Corey disclosed to the doctor at Ivy that my dad made me run on the treadmill, that I fell on the treadmill, and I also fell playing football. You will hear that she went against the advice of Ivy Pediatrics and left. And she took him to another hospital, community health center, I believe it's called, And at that hospital, they did another evaluation. And during that evaluation, Corey was healthy, had a few bruises, but still suspected child abuse. We recommend to you that we take Corey to Jersey Shore Medical Center. What does Brianna do? She leaves the hospital against medical advice. She leaves. She does at some point now take him by herself to Jersey Shore Medical Center, where he undergoes an evaluation. And you're going to hear that when he was at Jersey Shore Medical Center, they found that he had a possibility of something called sepsis, which you'll understand from a doctor. I'm not a doctor, I'm a lawyer. But doctors are going to testify here. And you're going to understand that sepsis is your body's reaction to an infection. And it's a rapid response to that infection. And that rapid response, you're going to hear from doctors, will tell you, can show a child is loopy, disoriented, nauseous. And Jersey Shore Medical Center told her, Brianna, leave the child here. And she did not. She took Corey home, signed papers against medical advice. She took him home. So she's running from hospital to hospital to hospital, making emergency applications, you're going to hear, making complaints to DCP&P. So what does she do next? She's so concerned. You're going to hear how concerned she is. The evidence is going to show you how concerned she is for her son's safety. You're going to hear evidence that she was so concerned, she brought him to Christopher. Because her visitation was over. Remember, she didn't have full custody. Her visitation was over. And you're going to hear evidence that when Corey came home, he was tired. And Christopher did not find that to be unusual. Because often, by the way, Christopher lived in Barnegat, Brianna lived up in the Englishtown area. You'll hear testimony that actually, at some point, they were together and actually looking at houses together. You can hear evidence of that. But when he arrived, he was tired. And yes, Christopher did not find that unusual because he would often come back from Brianna's house and he was tired. So he let him go to bed. And he slept. And he's on the phone with a woman, I believe her name is Marcy Brogner, and they're making plans to go on a date. And he's talking to her about what's going on in the house, that his son is there, that he's tired, that he's sleeping. And then you're going to hear testimony, I believe, from his mother, Christopher's mother, Carolyn. Because at some point, Christopher gets concerned because Corey's now been sleeping for a long time. So he calls his mom. Mom, I'm concerned. Corey has been sleeping quite some time now. And his mother just said to him, it happens every single time he comes back from their house. Let the kid sleep. So let him sleep. Then he ordered Grubhub. He ordered a Happy Meal, assuming that at some point, Corey would awaken. And he did. He woke, said he wasn't feeling well, He had some milk, and he went back to bed on the couch. You're going to see that Christopher took a picture of Corey on that couch and sent it to this woman, Marcy Brodman, about how Corey was sound asleep on the couch. You're going to hear testimony that when he did awake, he was complaining of leg pain, serious enough that Christopher was concerned. He began to throw up. You're going to hear testimony that he was loopy. You're going to hear testimony that he looked like he was drunk. And you're going to see Christopher drive him to Southern Ocean Medical Center. And you're going to see him pull up to the emergency department. And you're going to see him carry that little boy into a hospital. And you're going to see him standing there holding that child in his arms, which seems like hours, before anybody comes to help him. And they do. And they come and they help him and they take Christopher away, Corey away, and they start to do some testing. And then they decide they need to do a CAT scan. And while during the CAT scan, Corey seizes, goes into cardiac arrest. Life-saving techniques are now used to try to revive him, and he dies. And it sucks, because he's a kid. No child should die. No child should die. But it's not murder. And you're going to hear testimony from doctors, experts. You're going to hear testimony from Dr. Larkin, who, by the way, Dr. Larkin has no skin in the game. This is a doctor that comes to the hospital. He's from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner here in Ocean County. He has no idea what the relationship is between Christopher and Brianna and Christopher and Rebecca. He's got no clue. He just evaluates the child by science and medicine. Dr. Larkin found that Corey's blood results from Southern Ocean showed incredibly high white blood count, high glucose, and high lactic acid, and said that's all indicative of sepsis caused by an infection. The same sepsis that Jersey Shore Medical Center told Brianna Micholo, do not take this child from the hospital. He possibly has sepsis. We need to evaluate him. Chief Medical Examiner here in Ocean County, his evaluation, you're going to hear evidence, sepsis, infection, not murder. A CAT scan ordered after Corey's death by Dr. Larkin, evidence will show, showed the possibility of pneumonia. Pneumonia is an infection, and an infection causes sepsis. So the Ocean County Medical Examiner, the first person to evaluate Corey, which, by the way, is 12 days after the treadmill. 12 days. You're going to hear testimony that when he gets to Southern Ocean Medical Center, there's no report of any additional bruising since March 20th. You're going to see there's no signs of, I believe Ms. Schroen said, a hit with a baseball bat, stepped on, I don't know what she said, whatever she said.
Clear pointing of the finger at the mother of the child, saying Christopher, the father, the defendant, is not responsible for his death. Stay with us. You want to hear the remainder of the defense's opening statement. That will be next here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a closer look at the crime scene in the trial of Karen Reed. We're live from Massachusetts with the latest in the killer or cover-up murder trial.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Accomplice to Murder returns with an all-new season.
This is somebody he trusted.
This is in fact a murder.
They were in this together.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. All new season premieres Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Back to New Jersey for the Treadmill abuse murder trial for Christopher Gregor. Prosecutors say that 6-year-old Corey, his son, died at the hands of his father after repeated abuse, but the defense says Corey died from natural causes and that it was Corey's mom who was the abusive one. Let's get you back into court now for the remainder of the defense's opening statement. They are pointing the finger at the mother of Corey.
Doesn't show any proof of any of that. As a matter of fact, their own chief medical examiner, who did the autopsy, was inconclusive and could not come up with the cause or manner of death yet, pending investigation and toxicology reports. And he said, their chief medical examiner said that the injuries sustained to Corey were all due to life-saving techniques. He left the hospital. He was distraught. He was upset. He told the nurse, I need privacy, and he left. You're going to hear testimony that he called his parents immediately. Said Corey passed. They, Dave and Carolyn, you will hear, went immediately to the hospital and called the Stafford Police Department to tell them their grandson had just died in the hospital. You need to do an investigation here. They reported it. What did Brianna and Rebecca do immediately? Talk about him leaving. Rebecca and Brianna immediately turned to social media, where they tortured and crucified that man, posting a picture the same day of him in a prison outfit behind bars, wishing him death. They formed a chat group on Facebook dedicated to Corey, but evidence is going to show it really wasn't dedicated to Corey. It was dedicated into harassing the Gregor family. So much so, you're going to hear testimony that both Brianna and Rebecca were arrested in Monroe, New Jersey, and pled guilty for harassing Dave and Carolyn Gregor by protesting in front of their house, putting up posters on telephone.
Judge.
Can you approach that, Brooke?
Yes, please, thank you.
Is not evidence. Any representations that the attorneys have made to you are their anticipations that the evidence is going to show certain things, particularly when we get to things like medical conditions, observations of physicians. The attorneys admittedly are not doctors. So you're to accept these opening statements exactly as they're intended, what the lawyers claim they think they can prove in the case. If the lawyers are not able to adduce evidence which proves those things, then you're to disregard those parts of the opening statements which made those representations which were not later backed up by evidence. Next, there's just been an issue of whether or not there were some charges against the Michelows that resulted in some disposition. So first, the parties dispute whether or not there was a disposition of any kind of finding against the Michelows. That has not previously been presented to me. So what I'm going to do is, when that's presented, I'm going to make a ruling on whether that's admissible. Typically, municipal court level offenses are not admissible as proof of anything. Only if someone is convicted of a crime and they testify as a witness, and by a crime I mean a superior court level offense, would that evidence come in, and then I would give you an instruction as to how you analyze that conviction based upon the evidence. Here it's undisputed that there's no such conviction for a crime. So I'm going to ask you to disregard that reference right now that there's been some disposition in municipal court. If and when we come to that point, I'm going to make a ruling about what, if anything, you're allowed to consider in relation to that disposition in municipal court. At that time, if I allow it into evidence, I'll give you a specific instruction, and you're only to consider it for that limited purpose. But at this point, there's clearly no criminal conviction, so you should strike that part from your recollection. Mr. Gallucci is going to move on. I appreciate your time and attention. Mr. Gallucci.
So you're going to hear testimony that it was as a result of threats made to the Gregor family that Christopher stayed away. He was afraid to come back to New Jersey. But when contacted by his family that he was wanted for questioning, you will see GPS that shows him actually heading back to New Jersey to speak with the police. He is stopped, and I believe it's Alcoa, Tennessee. Not because they were looking for him. They were looking for his car. He was free to leave. They took his car because they had a search warrant. And they searched his car, and they found a cell phone, maybe some other things. And then he came back to New Jersey. Didn't stay away, didn't run away. You're going to hear testimony from 2, maybe 3 experts. You're going to hear testimony from Dr. Andrew, who's a forensic pathologist, I believe, from New Hampshire. I believe they're going to call him as an expert. You're going to hear from our expert, Dr. Michael Bottom, who's here in New York, and they both completely disagree on the result of Corey's death. Dr. Bottom, supported by medical records, is going to testify that Corey died from sepsis as a result of pneumonia, natural causes, that the bruises from March 20th had absolutely nothing to do with his death, had nothing to do with his sepsis, and that any bruising he had now was absolutely directly related to the life-saving techniques at the hospital in Southern Ocean Methodist. Now I get to that point where I want you to remember that you guys were chosen by all of us out of hundreds of people we went through. And we chose you because we all believed you would be fair, you would be impartial, you would listen to their evidence. I don't have to give you any evidence. I'm going to give it to you, but I don't have to. And I know you will listen. And this is important, as Judge Ryan explains to you all the time. This is one of the most important things you could do as a citizen. He uses the example that our men and women are fighting in foreign countries and dying. So you can sit here right now. This is an unbelievable, not only civic responsibility, but a human responsibility. You, as a human, are going to judge another human. And that is an awesome responsibility. And I know you all take it very seriously. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further, it's my function to give you.
All right, the judge had to admonish her, just let the jury know whatever the attorneys say in opening statements is supposed to be what the evidence will show. It's not the opinion of the attorney. So he clarified that.